Trustworthiness or rigor criteria in qualitative research. So, what does the term trustworthiness or rigor really mean in qualitative studies? And how does this concept relate to overall quality of qualitative research? And from a practical point of view, how can we establish trustworthiness in our projects using qualitative methodologies such as phenomenology, grounded theory, ethnography, case studies, or other types of qualitative methodologies? When you look at the literature, there are some theories and theoretical perspectives about this issue and a number of practical guidelines. What I do, I'll just have a quick look at the fundamental concepts, and then I share a number of practical guidelines. If you look at the literature in qualitative research about trustworthiness, you will definitely find papers written by Guba, Lincoln and Guba in different years, and there are variety of criteria, but these four concepts are the major terms that you will find, including credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability. So let's have a look at these concepts. What does credibility mean? It's similar to validity in quantitative studies, and it means how believable are the findings of our study. So how valid it is, and so how can we really trust the accuracy and validity of the result. Transferability means how can we transfer our understanding from one context to another context. And dependability means how reliable my research method is and how consistent I have been in my research. And confirmability means to what extent what I present as my findings are based on empirical data. So to explain these four criteria, what I do, I just give an example from my own research, then we can have a better understanding of the meanings. So for example, my research is about human information behavior in the context of serious leisure. And so there are two concepts here, human information behavior and serious leisure. So I need to define the concepts first. Human information behavior in a very simple and overall definition means how we interact with various forms of information, how we search, seek, browse, collect, and share and produce information. And serious leisure includes hobbies, voluntary activities, and amateurism, activities which are sufficiently challenging but adequately rewarding, and you need to learn some skills to engage in the activity, and after a while it will be part of your identity and it has the capacity to be your career. So what I did, I first defined the concepts in my research. Now I'll go through all these criteria to see how I need to explain credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability in my research, and you can do the same for your research. So let's have a look at credibility first. My result, my findings in this area show that engaging in serious leisure activities provide a number of personal and social benefits. For example, we can enjoy a sense of agency, a sense of achievement. So my result showed these findings. So to what extent is it believable for you? To what extent you find it compatible with common sense? So that's a sign of credibility of my research. But I need to give you a number of techniques that I use to make sure that my results are credible. And in next slide, I can give you some example. Transferability. To what extent the result that I have found in my own research, for example, for different groups of people, can be transferred between them. For example, when we talk about serious leisure, we are talking about more than 200 kinds of hobbies, such as, for example, bonsai growing or bird watching. So to what extent the result that I found in bonsai growing can be transferred to bird watchers or pottery or woodworking? Because transferability means uh, transferring the result from one context to another context, from one group of people to other groups. It's very similar to generalizability in quantitative studies. But remember that we don't want to generalize our findings in qualitative research. However, we need to make sure that the results are transferable from one context to another context. Dependability. How consistent I have been in my research? By explaining that you have selected a specific kind of methodology and you followed the steps that is recommended in that methodology, you can show dependability of your research. So for example, if you choose constructivist grounded theory, then you can say, okay, I have used Sharma's book as my guideline, and I followed all the steps that she suggested in her book. Or you might say, for example, I have followed this book, Grounded Theory, a Practical Guide, written by Melanie Berks and Jane Mills. So, and you explain how precise and accurate you have been in following the steps. And confirmability refers to the evidence that you have collected in your research, and your finding is based on the data you collected rather than your own perception or your assumption. So for example, in my research, I can say that I have been interviewing people from different groups of hobbies and voluntary activities, and these are my data, and that's what they told me. They shared their story with me, and these are examples of the interview transcriptions, and these are my interpretation. So basically, to be as accurate as possible and as transparent as possible. Sometimes there is even a concept called transparency as an example of trustworthiness. So the more you are transparent in terms of what you have done, the more credible your results will be. So let's have a closer look at one of these main criteria, credibility, which is the most important criterion among that list. So for example, there are many techniques. You can use a few of them. You don't have to use all of them. So for example, you might say, I had a prolonged engagement with my data. I interviewed people during a period of time. I have spent time on reflecting on my data. For example, if you are using grounded theory, you might say, I used constant comparison method to compare different codes with codes, different codes with categories, data with data. This prolonged engagement is a sign of the credibility of your research. In another example from my own projects, I say I have been doing a number of projects over the past 6 years, from 2017 to right now, which is end of 2023, and during these years I have been interviewing people, I have been exploring the literature, I have been reflecting on my findings. Persistent observation is another techniques. Thick descriptions, when you pay attention to details, when you have provided enough detail about everything you collected in your data. Member checking, you can ask the participants to clarify and confirm the accuracy of what you understood from the data. Triangulation, looking at data from different perspectives or collecting data from different sources. So for example, you might say, I interviewed people, I also observed them, I look at the documents, I look at videos, so I have multiple sources of data. Peer debriefing, when you ask another scholar to have a look at your data and see to what extent your understanding are similar. And finally, you can say that I had a number of negative case analysis in my research, because when we are doing qualitative research, we are not trying to prove a hypothesis. Basically, rather than hypothesis testing, what we do is a hypothesis generation. So when you find some contradictory results, that's good news, because you can compare the negative cases with the rest of your data and see what is the reason behind that, and it will enrich your analysis. So when you look at the literature, the different scholars publish different books and papers as guideline for your trustworthiness measures for your research. So for example, in a paper published by Rose and Johnson in 2020, they suggested 5 criteria to ensure trustworthiness. So first of all, epistemological understandings. When you have a clear understanding of the paradigm of your research, of the methodology you have chosen, and the understanding you have about the paradigm and methods is the first sign of the trustworthiness of your research. And then the depth of literature review. When you have a very clear understanding and detailed understanding of what is in the literature, then it helps you to have a more credible research. The appropriate theoretical positioning of the argument. In your research, you have some theoretical framework. To what extent this theoretical framework is appropriate for the scope of your research to address your research questions. When you answer this question, that's another sign of the trustworthiness of your research. Selection and deployment of the multiple and sometimes conflicting data, as I said earlier, is another technique. And the connection of empirical material to broader pictures, to larger theories and discourses in your discipline is very helpful to enhance the trustworthiness of your research. Because when you can position your research into a bigger picture and you show the similarities and differences of your findings with the literature, then it helps to enrich your study and enhance the quality of your qualitative research. In another example, Berks and Mills, in their book, they just suggested 3 main criteria: researcher expertise, methodological congruence, and procedural precision. So when you are an expert in your area, when you follow the methodologies precisely, when you have a clear understanding of your methodology, these are the main criteria. And if you look at the third chapter of the book, they have a very detailed explanation how to achieve these aims. And chapter 3 here, so quality process in grounded theory research. And I should add that in some papers and books, there are general guidelines about qualitative research in general, and in some papers and books, there are specific hints and suggestions for the methodology that you use. So, for example, in a paper written by Cathy Sharmas and Robert Thornburg in 2021, this is the paper, they actually suggested that the title of the paper is The Pursuit of Quality in Grounded Theory. They suggested 13 recommendations at the end of the paper as a list called Quality in Constructivist Grounded Theory Checklist and Guidelines. And these are the recommendation. I'm not going to read all of them. I just have a very brief reflection on a few of them. So, for example, achieving methodological self-consciousness, when you are aware of the method, when you know about the paradigm, when you are fully aware of the epistemological foundation of your methodology, when you learn everything you can about the type of qualitative inquiry you have, and have a very open and critical view about the literature. So rather than trying to prove your assumption or your hypothesis, you have a very clear and open view about the literature, and you explore it to have a better understanding of the topic. And then you gather rich data. The richer your data set, the more accurate your results will be. You collect stories of people in that field, and those who have experience, those who are your target group, and you are transparent about what you have done. You give detailed explanation of the whole process from the beginning towards the end. When you reach saturation point in your data, when you reach saturation in terms of your analysis. So, and to what extent you have been engaged in constant comparison, going back and forth between you and your data. You have a dialogue with your data set. So these are very good techniques. And then uncertainty tolerance. To what extent you have been tolerant about the uncertainty, because in qualitative research in general, when you begin the project, you are in a highest level of uncertainty. The more you collect the data, the more you analyze the data, then you will see uncertainty reduction. So that's a very good criterion here. So, and then as you proceed, ask more focused questions, because your questions at the beginning are very general and open, but when you collect and analyze data simultaneously, then you have new questions, you have emergent questions. And while you keep your primary question, you can add more emergent question to have a focused view about the data and analysis. And as you can see, there are other guidelines. I'm not going to read all of them. I recommend you read the whole paper here. So, the pursuit of quality in grounded theory. If you use grounded theory, that's excellent to use this paper. If you are using other qualitative methods, it's still helpful, because there are so many similarities in terms of the way we achieve credibility, transferability, confirmability in our qualitative projects. And these are a number of references. You can have a look for further information. And thank you for your attention.